Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CSIS on this beautiful morning. I'm Steve Morrison, Senior Vice President here at CSIS and Director of our Global Health Policy Center. We're really delighted today to have this major conference on polio, and we're thrilled and honored to have Senator McConnell here to kick things off. My boss, Dr. John Hamre, will do the introductions in a moment. I want to offer special thanks and congratulations to my colleagues, particularly Nellie Bristol and Isra Hussein, for pulling together the dinner last night and this complicated and really impressive program of speakers over the course of today, including videotaped communications from Dr. Tedros at WHO and Chris Elias from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're at a period, as we'll see over the course of the day, we're at a period of in the end game on the global eradication effort, 30 years into this effort, and it's a moment of pride and excitement and a certain amount of anxiety and uncertainty and debate. There's no question we've had truly remarkable progress and that this is a complicated and remarkable moment. The partners, Rotary, CDC, WHO, UNICEF, the Gates Foundation deserve enormous praise for the discipline and commitments that have been made over these decades. Gavi, the International Vaccine Alliance, deserves enormous credit for the role that it is assuming now. There are many fundamental questions that are in front of us. Most importantly, this is a form of health security. We have to operate more effectively in disordered settings like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Northeast Nigeria. The investment in basic immunization infrastructure for polio in many low-income countries is the most basic capacity for surveillance and for immunization capacity for those societies. We've learned a lot in the last 30 years about operating amidst conflict in doing multiple campaigns against polio. As we'll hear today, there's debate over what is the end game, how do we define success, when do we define it, in what timeline, and we have to complete the work while also thinking about the future and transitioning towards preserving those assets and repurposing them for broader and endurable benefits. That's not so easy to do. We began last night with many of our speakers that have come a distance to be here with us, gathered together with Dr. Redfield, Director of CDC, for a very animated discussion around many of these same issues, and we'll continue that today. Dr. Redfield has a family emergency, unforeseen, which keeps him from being here today. He sends his greetings, and fortunately, John Verfoy from CDC is going to stand and deliver his speech and take questions and provide comments over the course of that. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us today, and to all of our speakers who've come a distance, thank you so much. And Senator McConnell, thank you. John?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm John Hamre, the president at CSIS. Before we have public events like this, we always have a little safety announcement, and either Steve or I are going to make sure you're safe. If you hear a voice that tells us we have to evacuate, the exits are right behind us here on the stage. There's a stair right closest to this one. We'll go down one flight down to the street. We'll take two left-hand turns, take a right turn, go over to National Geographic, and I'll buy tickets for everybody to see the Titanic show. It's really good. It's really impressive. People don't know that that was a cover story for a secret operation to try to recover the Scorpion. It's a fascinating story. You should go take a look at it sometime. We're very fortunate to have Senator McConnell with us today. His world changed overnight because there was an announcement of a Supreme Court nomination, and he is going to race up to the Hill to start the process of confirmation for the new Supreme Court Justice nominee. I'm very grateful that Senator McConnell would join us. He has a personally very moving personal story about polio. I can remember as a young kid when the vaccine was first made available. We'd line up on Sunday afternoon. We'd go up to the courthouse, and that little sugar tablet, and it was quiet, orderly. It was almost like a communion, and what stood out in my mind was how much people trusted the government to do the right thing to help them. Gosh, I wish we could get back to that era. And fortunately, we do have government people with us today who are doing that for America every day. We're very fortunate that Senator McConnell, with all of his astounding responsibilities, has championed polio eradication. He has held this up personally as an emblem of what America can do, and he has been insistent that the government shoulder its responsibilities to help with the global eradication of polio. This is a unique contribution from a very, very busy man. Would you please welcome him with your warm applause?
Well, thank you, John, and good morning. I'm really happy to be here. This is extremely important and personal issue with me. Dr. Morrison, CSIS, our partners at USAID, Rotary International, the Gates Foundation, this has been an extraordinary collaborative effort. I wasn't invited to speak today because you all needed me to bring you up to speed on the latest particulars in the fight to eradicate polio. Quite the opposite. I'm sure I could learn a lot from each of you. All of you are the experts. You're manning the front lines of this fight. So I want to take this opportunity to offer a few big picture observations for your consideration and also express my personal gratitude to all of you. Because while it's an honor for me to stand here in my capacity as Senate Majority Leader, it's a particular honor to thank you in a different capacity as a polio survivor myself. My first memory in life was the last visit to Warm Springs, Georgia. I was 2 years old. My dad was in Europe fighting the Germans. We lived in Athens, Alabama, but my mother decided while Dad was overseas to go live with her sister in a different part of Alabama, which was literally just a farm crossroads. There wasn't even a stoplight. 5 Points, Alabama. And so the local doctor thought I had the flu. And when the flu went away, they noticed a paralysis in my left leg, the quadricep, the muscle between the knee and the thigh. And of course, he suspected that it was polio and didn't know what to do about it. But fortunately, we were 60 miles from Warm Springs, Georgia, a little over an hour's drive. And he recommended we go over there. And we did. And at that particular point, remember this is 10 years before the vaccine, at that particular point, whatever experts there were on whatever rehabilitation you could achieve were at Warm Springs, Georgia. So I was really lucky to be that close by. They took a look at me and they taught my mother a physical therapy regimen. And they said, we need you to do this 4 times a day. And listen to this, any of the women in the room who've had children, or even if you haven't, remember I'm 2 years old, we don't want him to try to walk. Because we think if he tries to walk prematurely, whatever comeback we may be able to get out of applying this physical therapy regimen may fail, and he'll be in a brace the rest of his life. So my mother, like a drill sergeant, literally watched me every waking moment for 2 years. So I was never a patient at Warm Springs, but she would take me over there periodically and they'd check on the progress. And she told me one time while they were over there, she held me up to a window as President Roosevelt drove by. And so after 2 years, My first memory in life was our last visit to Warm Springs, where the nurse told my mother, "I think he's going to be okay. Looks like he'll be able to walk without a limp and without a brace and have a normal childhood." So that was my first memory in life. The hero of my story, obviously, is my mother. How many mothers would have had the discipline to basically put everything else aside and just watch a 2 to 4-year-old all day, every day, to make sure I didn't try to walk too soon? So the story of my life is that, with the exception of some difficulty, going downstairs, I have kind of a slight limp. I've had a normal life. But as all of you know, in those days, you could end up dying. You could end up in an iron lung. You could end up horribly disabled. Some people even miraculously had a complete comeback. And 10 years later, I can remember, as John mentioned earlier, that when the vaccine came out, there was a palpable, audible sigh all across America. And all of us kids in school would be taking the vaccine. So in the late 80s, when the Global Polio Eradication Initiative was formed, it was estimated the disease still paralyzed 350,000 people a year. Since that time, polio cases have fallen more than 99%. All of you are on the cusp of an extraordinary accomplishment here. And I'm told we're sort of down to, Afghanistan and Pakistan? But there's also an important effort to keep it from coming back. This is a huge victory, and it didn't happen by magic. It happened because of the people in this room, because of organizations like those represented here, and it happened because, as far as I can tell, you've kept a few key principles in mind, a few key concepts that, frankly, I try to practice here in Washington. One of them is persistence. Persistence. I think it's underappreciated outside the public health community just how much hard work and innovation has to continue once a disease has dropped off the front pages. If the enemies of polio were to take their foot off the gas, progress could erode rapidly. You've kept it even as the spotlight has moved on to other diseases. That, my friends, is persistence. Another key quality has been patience. You've understood that all along this was a decades-long fight, not a short scramble. I know that can be difficult. My mom reminded me that patience wasn't exactly my strong suit as a 4-year-old during the treatments that I described to you. I was actually anxious to get up and go play. Imagine how much it took to deter that on the part of my mother. Fortunately, that didn't last. Throughout my career in politics, I've found that enduring success only comes to those who have the patience to play the long game. I'm just lucky that my caregivers were willing to be patient and play the long game. Researchers were willing to play the long game. Today, the polio eradication effort is proof of what it looks like to win the game, or very close to winning the game. And along the way, the third big lesson, I think you have shared some of the very best of America with the word. Many of you know that prior to becoming Republican leader, I was either the chairman or the ranking member of the State Foreign Operations Subcommittee for many years. I've always believed that our national security is enhanced when we employ foreign assistance in pursuit of strategic objectives. And over the past decade, we can be proud that the State Foreign Operations Subcommittee has appropriated more than $500 million to polio eradication efforts alone. our nation should continue to reach out and engage the rest of the world. But success stories like the discovery and propagation of the polio vaccine show us how much good is done and has always been done as part of our foreign policy. I've always been a big believer in the non-defense part of what we do overseas. You know, everybody criticizes foreign assistance. They assume we're wasting an enormous amount of money. The truth of the matter is, you know, it is a fraction, tiny fraction of what we spend every year, and you get a lot more bang for the buck, certainly, than having to send in the military. Regretfully, that's necessary from time to time, but we do an awful lot of good with a very small percentage of what we spend every year. All the researchers and experts and academics and nonprofits and entrepreneurs whose hard work and good efforts have spilled over our borders and have actually helped transform the world into a better place for everyone. So you should be proud. We all should. This is America at its finest. Think of the countries where polio remains, as we were saying, like Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as a few other countries with circulating vaccine-derived cases, and ponder the security environment in each of those countries. Think of the progress that your efforts could achieve if we could reduce the level of conflict in each place. Think of the progress that could be made if we reduce the presence of insurgents, those who teach an erroneous version of the Quran, and those spreading disinformation about vaccine programs. The people of these countries have witnessed brutal conflict, and many of you have been in the fight to eradicate polio in those daunting places. But more broadly, I want to ask you to keep up the persistence, keep up the patience, the same qualities that I was talking about in my mother. I know there are many other pressing battles. Resources are always limited. But I've been in Washington long enough to see what happens when victory is declared prematurely, when you plan the victory party before you truly finish your homework. And keep sharing the best of our nation's and the world's values, our brain power, our innovation, and our heart with people who need it. A vaccine is really an amazing thing. In a way, it's better than even the best treatment or cure, because it preserves a normal childhood and a normal life from the very beginning. How many stories like mine never had to be written because the international community took action? How many families never had to give a second thought to their children's first pair of walking shoes? Weren't given any reason to mark it as a particularly special occasion. So on their behalf, and on mine, my final words are, thank you all.